So I receive a call from Baruch and Dietram, and they say, we'd like you to speak at the Sackler Colloquium. And I say, great, that sounds fabulous. I can't wait. What would you like me to speak about? And they say, we'd like you to speak about, on the panel devoted to building organizational infrastructures for effective communication. Specifically, we'd like you to highlight lessons across corporate government and academic experience. And I said, really? I've never done a shred of research on that question. And I said, I don't think I'm the right one. And one of them, I won't tell you which, said, Ed, don't undress the maid yourself. There was a very awkward pause in the conversation at that point, and the other one chimed in, what my distinguished colleague meant to say is don't underestimate yourself. So I said, okay, fine. You guys think I can do it, I can do it. So that's exactly what we're going to spend the next 22 and a half minutes doing. I'm actually going to take it a step further. I'm going to go beyond lessons learned, and I'm going to actually make some recommendations, as if that is my place to do so, but let's give it a try. And I'm actually going to begin with the end of my talk. We're going to reference the renowned communication strategist and theorist, Albert Einstein, who is in a state of repose out there on Constitution Avenue, and he said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. That's it. That is my message to you. If we can do that, we will succeed in science communication. The first lesson, however, one way for us to get there, and it is truly a paradox of communication, and that is the less we say, the more we are heard, but that means we've got to say it more often. To do this right, it means we've got to get really clear in our own minds about what is most worth saying. Got to find ways to say it concisely, simply, concretely. These are all, by the way, lessons that all of the speakers prior to me have made already, but that's okay. I'm going to say them as simply as I am capable. It also means that we've got to make these points early and often. Repetition is the mother of learning. We've got to encourage trusted others to make these points as well. I'm going to talk more about trust in a moment, but as trusted as we are, it is helpful when other trusted sources can repeat our messages. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, we've got to say it in a way that members of our intended audience can say it to each other. If I can't say it to my neighbor over the back fence when I'm mowing the lawn this weekend, you all have failed to give it to me in an appropriately simple manner. So in my days in the public health community, we had distilled it down to essentially this formula for effective public communication. Simple, clear messages repeated often by a variety of trusted sources. When we can do that, more often than not, we succeed in sharing what is most important to share with our target audience. I give you 4 simple words, and any of you who have been a parent in the past 15 years, or even a grandparent in the past 15 years, you know these 4 words. Baby back to sleep. I know you know what I mean by those 4 words, and that is a campaign that has reduced sudden infant death syndrome in this country by over 50% over the past 15, 20 years, and countries around the world. Simple, clear message, repeated often by a variety of trusted sources. I need to pay homage here. I want to pay homage to my very first professional employer, and that was the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, because this is where I first learned the notion of simple, clear messages repeated often by a variety of trusted sources. This homage, this visual montage is referencing the National High Blood Pressure Education Program. The data, it's not my data, it's national data. It essentially makes the point that we as a nation have enjoyed dramatic decline in death from stroke in this case, between 1970, when this program started, and the year 2000, a reduction in stroke by over 60%. It is not solely attributable to good communication, but good communication, simple, clear messages, repeated often by a variety of trusted sources, created the conditions for the pharmaceutical industry, for the hospital industry, for the medical professional societies, for the health voluntary associations, the Heart Association, the Lung Association, etc., to come together in a series of conversations about how to shape simple, clear messages, repeat them often through their variety of trusted sources. And the outcome of this is truly a remarkable public health victory. So what does this mean for organizations that want to get better at science communication? Well, it means we've got to put a lot more attention into the process of communicating than we have done so in the past. It means that we've got to coordinate our communication efforts both internally, so that we are all singing from the same song sheet within our organization, as well as externally, to try to bring other trusted sources into the conversation with us. This is not necessarily an action, a process that comes naturally to science organizations. But if we want to do better with science communication, this is one we've got to embrace. So the second lesson, and this is a lesson we've learned from Baruch and from Wendy and from many other leaders in the field who are here with us today, and that is the decision about what to say should be informed by audience research. As much as we all have our own pet notions about what is most important to say, that's incredibly undisciplined. The disciplined way to do it is to turn the lens on the audience and figure out what it is that is most useful for them to hear. There's really three types of information that we can distill from audience research. We can learn what few facts, insert your science issue here, once understood, are going to make the biggest difference in helping members of our audience understand the issue as scientists understand the issue. That is not necessarily going to change people in the way you might want to change them, but that really is the most appropriate objective for science communication within all of the limits and constraints that effective communication pose on us and on them. Do we all remember what this is? Skip taught us yesterday. This is a neuron. And that is the fundamental limitation of effective communication, a neuron, and the billions and billions of neuronal connections between each of our sets of ears. So the best we can do is help you work within that limitation to help audiences understand the issue the way that scientists do. Another incredibly important thing we can learn from audience research is what are the misunderstandings, the misperceptions that are misinforming people about the ways in which what the science is telling us about the issue. So the facts that are most important, the misperceptions, that should be our biggest concern. And then finally, the notion doing audience research will help disabuse us of the notion that there is such a thing as the general public. There is rarely a public. We've heard this morning from Matt Nisbet about the erroneous assumption that there is a polarized, that everybody's on one end of the continuum or the other. So audience research is an incredibly useful way to help us understand the plurality of sets of understanding about an issue out there amongst the larger public. So here's an example about an important misperception. This happens to come from the work of the two joined research teams at Yale and George Mason. But interestingly enough, John Krosnick from his research team and his data at Stanford showed us the very same thing yesterday. And the misperception is that only about 1 out of 3 Americans understands that the community of climate scientists have come to consensus, or at very least widespread agreement, that climate change is real and human caused. In a paper that we published in Nature Climate Change last fall, we showed that this is a particularly important misperception because people who misunderstand the widespread scientific agreement are less likely to understand a number of other key beliefs about climate change, key factual beliefs about climate change, which ultimately are important because they undermine or undergird, undergird people's support for climate policies of a variety of types, and as well as a more generalized sense that we, all of us, citizens, companies, government officials, should be doing more to address climate change. So this is an important, widespread misperception that we feel needs to be debunked. Matt Nisbet did me the favor of introducing you to the Six Americas this morning. He did a very nice job of that. I don't need to belabor the point, but I will reinforce the point by saying understanding the diversity of views helps us make better decisions about how to communicate effectively or how to do public outreach and public engagement with these different audiences. This is a bit of an oversimplification, but I think it's fair. I think I've fairly simplified some of the things that we've been learning about the Six Americas. The two Americas on the left hand of the continuum, the group we call the alarmed and the concerned, they don't really need to know more about the risks of climate change. They're much more interested in learning from our nation's climate scientists what our nation can do to address the risks and what they as individuals can do to address the risks. This broad set of groups in the middle that Matt said we desperately need to do a better job of engaging, they're still interested in learning more about why is this a bad thing? I get it. I understand that you're telling me it's real and it's human cause, but I'd like to know more about why is this bad? In what ways will this be bad? Parenthetically, for me. Matt's comments this morning about let's be clear about the ways in which climate change is bad for people, human health and well-being, as a way to address the questions that are resident in the minds of these audiences. And then finally, the group, the segment at the end of the continuum, a group we call dismissives. This gentleman and those of his kind are really interested in knowing more about why they should trust us. And I'm going to show you a little, well, I won't actually show you that data, but they are still willing to trust members of the science community, but they want to know why they should trust us. So my second recommendation is if we're interested in doing science communication more effectively, we should be systematically investing in the collection of audience data that will allow us to do this type of research. This is a systematic process in the public health community, so there is a portion of the science communication community that does invest in this way systematically. It is not yet systematic in other portions of the science communication world, or the science world. So my third point, our most important asset, we are trained in graduate school to believe it is our knowledge, our expertise. Not so. We've already heard very, very clearly by many speakers. I particularly like the way that Dr. Kahneman did it last night. He made the point that trust really is our most important asset. And effective communication, effective education can only happen in the context of trust. Tony Leiserowitz and my research team, we've looked very at this issue with regard to climate change in quite a lot of depth. Every time we look at it, we come away with a bit of self-satisfaction because we identify yet again that our nation's climate scientists are, in fact, a very trusted set of experts, of communicators on this issue. But it's interesting. So, and that actually, I showed John Krosnick's data, which shows that conservatives, Republicans, excuse me, not conservatives, Republicans who have low trust in climate scientists are the ones who we have not been doing a good job of communicating with most recently. But those who do have high trust for scientists, they have been listening to what scientists have been saying much more systematically. So that's a really important finding. Normally, I would show this slide and I would ask the question before I did, who is Canada's most trusted person? And normally one of you would shout out Wayne Gretzky or one of a half a dozen different hockey players, but it's my friend David Suzuki. David Suzuki, who is a geneticist, a biologist, an environmental scientist, and who for 2 years running was voted by the readers of Reader's Digest Canada, Canada's most trusted person. It's a wonderful comparison to, well, it's a wonderful epiphany that scientists can be that trusted. When was the last time we had a scientist in America who reached this level of trust? I would suggest it might have been C. Everett Koop, and that's been a while. But clearly we have the capacity to be trusted if, as David Pogue suggested, we have the platform. David Suzuki has the platform. He is the weekly host of The Nature of Things. He comes into Canadians' living rooms through their television set once a week for the past 23 years, I believe. But the reason why he is trusted, according to Reader's Digest magazine, honest, compassionate, and communicating a clear message. It's easy to see why Canadians have voted him most trusted person twice in a row. But I particularly like the words of Jacqueline Fitzpatrick, one of the voters, who said, he knows how to reach out and explain things so the common man understands. That's great. What is going on here? Dr. Kahneman unpacked it for us last night. This is pure system one. Familiarity leads to liking. Liking leads to trust. This is a really, really important message from Dr. Kahneman's talk last night. David's had a uniquely good platform to create that familiarity, build the liking, and earn the trust of Canadians. The problem with the data that Tony and I collect about the degree to which Americans are, climate scientists are trusted, is that other polls have shown that Americans actually don't know who our climate scientists are. They can't think of one. They can't name one. They can't name any scientist by name. And among the 1 out of 3 who are willing to try, many of them name not a living scientist, but sometimes long deceased scientists. So the notion of our climate scientists being trusted is there, but this wonderful, physical or parasocial relationship that Canadians have with David Suzuki is not yet there. So my recommendation is that for organizations who are really going to get serious about improving their science communication, they've got to systematically make the effort to help their scientists as well as their institution become more familiar, become more liked, and become more trusted with the people with whom they are trying to share their knowledge. So the fourth lesson, it takes a team. If we're going to do science, the science of science communication, it is not all on scientists' shoulders. That isn't the formula for success. We need to build a team. The team has 3 types of positions that we need to fill and fill well. Not just, the 4th stringers, but we need to find some 1st stringers who are going to fill these positions. It's the content experts, the people who actually know the science. It's the social scientists and the decision scientists, the people like Baruch and Wendy, who can work with the content experts to figure out what information is most valuable to members of the target audience. And it is people who I will call them communication practitioners. It is people who know how to actually get the message out repeatedly into the lives of our target audience so that they begin to develop these associations that we have heard about for the past day and a half. Unfortunately, this is the exception. This, meaning building a team of science communicators, is still the exception rather than the rule. This is a particularly wonderful exception that I found in science this January. It was a SPORE award winner, Lessons from a Science Education Portal. I don't know David, Susan, or Amy. I've read their article about 20 times now. I infer a lot about their story. These are learning scientists. They have worked with genetic scientists from the Cold Spring Harbor Labs, and they have designed some really terrific web-based resources teaching both about cancer, biology, as well as about DNA and genetics in general. So a very successful collaboration between learning scientists and content experts. But what you see in this chart here is that they became worried that their use was starting to drop off around, somewhere 2009, 2010. And they started to partner with communication experts to figure out how they could adapt their web design, their web display, to reignite the growth that they had clearly enjoyed. The bottom line of this successful collaboration, they put this to a rigorous test, a very, very sophisticated quasi-experimental evaluation, a crossover design with 28 high schools, 626 students. Students received one or the other of these 2 modules, and the same student, on average, got a 1-letter grade improvement as a result of using these web-based resources. That's pretty great. So the 4th recommendation, if we're going to be serious about this, we've got to build these interdisciplinary teams so we can improve both information design as well as information delivery. So the 5th and final lesson, this slide doesn't quite work. The point, though, that I wanted to make with this slide is that, yes, evaluation of science communication is tricky, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing it. We're not yet, I guess the real takeaway slide from all of this noise is that we're not yet investing in evaluations of science communication in a systematic way. Not one scholarly site popped up when I did the search on evaluation and science communication. And the 3 sites that did come up are in fact quite old. And while I was preparing on Saturday, Gary Gutting, the editor of the Notre Dame Philosophical Reviews, did me the favor of posting an opinion piece on the New York Times called "How Reliable Are the Social Sciences?" It's a pretty tough swipe at us. He's basically saying we shouldn't ignore their evidence, but we shouldn't place a whole lot of trust in it because they're not really doing hard, science at the highest levels yet. He's not the first to say this. Those of us in the field, we've heard it early and often, unfortunately. I think the best reply to this critique is actually authored by Bob Hornick, who in his 2002 book called Public Health Communication, Evidence for Behavior Change, he concluded, I'm not going to read the whole thing because I don't have time, but I will instead say that just point you to the blue text. Bob says that yes, there is no perfect evaluation design, but a valuable study is one that can usefully inform the policy community about whether the intervention approach is worthy of support without promising that there is no risk of a mistake. A study is valuable if future judgments about programs are better made taking this information into account than remaining ignorant of it. And I would contend to you that we can pass this bar 99 times out of 100 if we actually put the effort into doing evaluation of science communication. And the preceding step is if we actually fund the evaluation of science communication. So my final recommendation is that organizations that are serious about this have got to make evaluation of their science communication a priority. So I now end where I began, which is again simply to reiterate the point that everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. Thank you.